much for coming to our session on advocacy and journalism. Thanks to all of the friends from near and far who came out today for this. Super excited. So our panel is going to discuss not can advocates and journalism work together, but how can we work together? So click. My name is Ignaczak. I am the founder and editor of Planet Detroit. We launched in 2019. We focus on public health and environment issues that face Detroiters and Metro Detroiters. I launched it really because in my own work in journalism and in the media ecosystem that we're seeing here in Detroit, I just didn't see the kind of coverage of the local environmental issues that we face that I wanted to see. I also didn't see it in my prior work in community planning and working in environmental issues. It just seemed like the people that were being most affected by these issues were being shut out of the discussion, and I really wanted to do something to try to change that. So that's kind of where the idea for Planet Detroit came from and how we got here today. Planet Detroit right now is, oops, oh well, that's okay. This is us so far. It's me. We have a full-time reporter. We have a reporting intern, Jada Vassar, full-time reporter, Brian Allnut, Martina Guzman, who isn't here but should be, who's our community editor, and Isabel Tavares is our Report for America reporter who will be starting soon. And then also we have April Boyle, who is working on our impact partnership in the audience here too. All right, click. So I wanted to just start out by talking about this collaboration, and I'll have everybody introduce themselves as we kind of go through each person, but this is a collaboration that was funded through the Collaborative Journalism Institute with funding from the Rita, blanking on it right now. Does anybody remember who funded this? Yes, Rita Allen Foundation, thank you, sorry. With the Rita Allen Foundation, and the idea behind this grant was to pair journalism organizations with civil service organizations. So what does that mean? That means something that we were already kind of doing. As a news outlet that focuses on the environment, we use the tools of journalism and rigorous reporting and fact-checking and all of that, but we do have a point of view. That point of view is that climate change is real, people deserve to breathe clean air, and that the issues of climate change are disproportionately in our community and many others impacting people who live in low-income areas and primarily people of color. So that's sort of the point of view that we're coming from. And we do work with advocacy organizations often. They give us tips. They often have technical expertise that we don't have. And so this grant was to try to pair us with a project. There was, I think, 10 of us that were funded. Pair us with an advocacy organization to see what kind of reporting we could do in partnership with each other. So that's what we did. And we focused on air quality in Metro Detroit. And to do that, we partnered with the Ecology Center, which is like 51 years old, nonprofit that's been around for a very long time, has a lot of experience and respect in the community that focuses on environmental health issues. And so that's what we did, and we worked with them from the very beginning. We worked with them to conceive the project, to understand what some of the issues that we should be covering were, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. And so, as I was putting this project together, I was looking at some research that came through the collaborative journalism program, and this paper was really interesting about cross-field collaboration. Came out last year, Sarah Stonebelly and Hannah Simazko. And so, it looks at, if anybody's interested in this topic, I recommend reading this paper. It looks at some of the benefits of collaborating with advocacy organizations. They call it civil organizations. And so, some of those benefits are, amplifying the content, getting access to expertise, making sure that, the impact from investigative journalism, which is hard to come by, is amplified. Click. Oops, back. Sorry. Okay. So as we joined into this partnership, we wanted to know that we were coming to it kind of from the same place, from a sense of shared values and shared goals. And really, our shared values were simple. We both had the values that people deserve a clean environment. We both believe that people deserve to breathe clean air. And we had similar impact goals as well. We should be holding people accountable that are contributing to our air quality problems and raising awareness about the problems. So that's basically where we came from, and where we ended up with was a pretty in-depth series. We also collaborated with Outlier Media to report it, that was informed by the expertise of the Ecology Center and their 50-year plus history working on these issues, and a lot of technical and science-based expertise that they brought to it as well. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the panel, starting with Jeff Gearhardt of the Ecology Center. Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Just introduce myself, or do you want me to?
You can talk, yeah.
Okay. Hi, Jeff Gearhardt. I'm research director at the Ecology Center. We are a nonprofit research and advocacy organization. We have 2 offices. Our main office is in Ann Arbor. We have a set of staff who work in Detroit as well, and we have an office here. I've been doing this work for over 30 years and was really excited about this collaboration. I think do you want me to?
I can prompt you with my questions. Yeah. Obviously, we didn't do a lot of props. Sorry, people. So you've had this long career in advocacy. What do you see? And you do a lot of it in terms of like collecting data and making that data available to the public. That's at the root of a lot of the work that you do. What do you see as the similarities or the differences between that work and what a journalist tries to do?
Yeah, I really appreciate your comment. Our approach, and there's a couple of us on the panel who can talk more about this, is really a community-based participatory research approach in terms of the work we do, where the issues are identified by the community, the research goals are identified, and we're there really as a partner with the community, and that's been the focus of our science work. The other part of when we think about science is a lot of our work is debunking, similar in the journalism world, debunking the myth of neutral science. When we think about science, I think sometimes the public thinks, well, it's a scientific study, it must be right. Mm-hmm. And when you peer behind science studies, who funded them? So much science is funded by industry. What are the values that were brought to the science? What are even the research questions that were developed? Whether they came from the ivory tower in an academic world or they were actually issues identified by communities that they're concerned about. So we really try to challenge the notion that science in and of itself, it doesn't have values, and then once you challenge that, you need to have full disclosure by a researcher. What are their values? Who's paying for the research? How did they develop their thesis and the questions they're asking? So I think it's really important to collaborate with journalists who understand that perspective and can ask the hard questions when they're presented with scientific information to be able to really pull that apart and see what lies behind it.
And so have you ever worked collaboratively like this with journalists before? And if so, what is that like? How do you typically work with journalists?
Yeah. We've worked a lot with, I would say, way less friendly and allied journalists other than the project we did here, and it's a challenge because we do work a lot with more paid mainstream media where we've developed and did testing projects that were in connection with community identified concerns. A number of these have been national studies that we've worked with groups on. Right now we're doing a national study with a group of environmental justice organizations on dollar stores, looking at problematic products sold by dollar stores. And it's really challenging working with mainstream media and trying to set some values and standards for how we're going to work together with them. So I think that's a really important upfront part of any collaboration, obviously. I think as you outlined here, what are the goals, what are the shared values going into this? Because we've gotten burned, communities get burned on these projects all the time. When you think you have a trusting relationship with a reporter and you don't recognize anything that showed up in the story, and it's really devastating. It's really devastating, and it promotes mistrust with the media, which is well-deserved for the most part. And so that kind of process is really important on the upfront.
Yeah, I think the fact that we had those shared values going in, I mean, we did not allow you to review the stories beforehand. We fact-checked with you, but, and we relied on your technical expertise. And so I think that's maybe, just looking forward, some of the things that did work with our collaboration. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it was a collaboration where we really did the upfront work. And then a lot of the work was really, like the work we do was connecting Nina with the organizations on the ground that were going to be part of the research on the project. So we helped facilitate a lot of those connections with some of the folks on the panel here, and that built the basis for the story. But yeah, the upfront establishing the working relationship and how that was going to go is critical.
All right, I'm going to move on to our next panelist, Angela. Click. All right, good. Angela, you were our community journalism fellow, and then you were also a community reporter. You did a lot. We worked with Ken. Tell us about your journey from kind of advocacy. Well, first introduce yourself.
Yes,
sorry.
okay.
And then
So when I started this, good afternoon. My name is Angela Lugo-Thomas. I am a Highland Park resident, but I have lived in Detroit since 1979, but originally from Puerto Rico. But I got kind of introduced, I didn't know that Planet Detroit was such a baby when I first connected with you, because I had been following you probably from the beginning, and I was a fan of the work, and so I got introduced to Planet Detroit by doing my first op-ed, and so I was part of a group called Belle Concerned, and we fought against having the Grand Prix basically set up a racetrack on Belle Park, which is in Detroit, is one of our gems. And so I did an op-ed, and then I think the following year, there was a job posting, and when someone said, you should go for it, and it was community engagement director. I was already out in the community very often, so I went for it without thinking that I would be selected, and it was a wonderful experience. And then 1 month in, Nina had me attend an event and then write about it, and I was hooked. Basically.
well, I knew that she could write because I'd
I
seen
was
her
hooked.
writing.
I just love being able to tell stories from my community and places that I've always kind of frequent anyway, and covering people that I admired for many years.
Yeah. So what was it like for you coming from that advocacy background to have to we had some conversations and stories where, we had to take a step back and verify things and make sure that we were telling the truth. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so it was strange, because so many of the people that I was talking to as a journalist knew me, so I had to kind of separate the two, but I was very, very careful about what I wrote and made sure that, although I was looking through, the lens of a community member and someone who fought against many of the things that, I was reporting on now, I also wanted to be accurate, and I wanted to tell a fair and balanced story. So that was very important, and I was very appreciative, because I don't have a journalism background, to have experts that helped me along the way and were able to, guide me and suggest and edit my work. And that was very helpful for me, coming from just being a, community member.
So you've gone back to advocacy work, but are you going to still write some stories for Planet Detroit?
I was telling someone earlier that when I work for Keep Growing Detroit now, which is the largest urban farming gardening organization in the city of Detroit, Highland Park, and Hamtramck. But I was telling someone earlier that when I left you all in November, I probably had a list of 20 stories that I wanted to work on. So yes, I hope to still freelance and do that work, because I do miss it. I miss it, but yeah, I'm not gone. I'm
right,
definitely gonna plug back in.
And I'm gonna hold you to that. All right, click. Ken Paulman. Ken has been an amazing partner to Planet Detroit. Do you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll prompt your questions?
Sure, and nice job putting Angela on the spot and getting those stories filed. That's good tactic. My name is Ken Paulman. I'm the director of the Energy News Network. We are a nonprofit news service covering the transition to a clean energy economy. We're based at Fresh Energy, which is a public policy organization in St. Paul, Minnesota. And as Nina mentioned, we've had the great fortune to work on a number of different collaborations over the years on community journalism. Cleveland, I want to talk to you. Yeah.
And so, Ken, tell us about the structure of Energy News Network and Fresh Energy, which is an advocacy organization. How does that work, and how do you pursue the journalism in a way that's ethical and maintains its integrity?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really unique circumstances around how this got started in the first place, but the short version is it started as an aggregation project just covering the Midwest called Midwest Energy News, very clever. And that's not an uncommon thing for issue-based organizations to do, is to gather up news clips. What we did is we made it a public-facing news site and a resource for anybody to use. And we started growing into original reporting and expanding nationally. And it's a little bit odd that it's based at Fresh Energy, and so it's sort of like, why Fresh Energy? And to me, it's like, well, why not? When we originally started, the guy that hired me was an old newspaper guy. I came from a newspaper background and public radio, and he was very concerned about that question. And I was like, listen, the work is going to speak for itself. And at the end of the day, our capital here is credibility. And that's a common thread when we, I saw in the previous panel and with working with Angela and telling her stories, like with Raquel earlier, that people have stories to tell, but if you want to persuade and convince an audience, you need to be credible. And that's not the sort of strictures and the sort of church of journalism that sort of prevented people from doing that. I think we're seeing was a little bit of a mirage and a facade for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so within the organization, we have the same kind of firewalls in place that a newspaper would have between the newsroom and the advertising department. And I made it clear when I started that there are lines we cannot cross, and if I am told to cross a line, I am out the door. And it's never come up in almost 15 years. We've had one incident where there was some friction with a funder, that things got a little weird, but we worked that out, and I was very clear. They wanted something taken out of a story, and I said, I'm walking out the door before I take anything out of that story. We need to find another way. We found another way, it worked out. That compares to many more incidents in the 5 years that I worked in sort of mainstream news outlets where that kind of pressure was exerted from a business interest, from a community member, from the publisher. On editorial content. It happens all the time in our business, and you can stand up for it just as easily, actually more easily in an organization like Fresh Energy, because I'm rambling. The work of public policy is similar to journalism, as Jeff kind of described. I mean, you're researching, you're fact-checking, you're pouring through regulatory dockets and legislation and things like that. And also, credibility is your capital as well, because when you're trying to change things, it's much harder to move the mountain than it is to leave the mountain stay put. And so you have to work that much harder to be credible, to be taken seriously. And so I work with people who have tremendous integrity and a very high ethical standard and very high standard for truth-telling that I would rival against any newsroom in the country, to be honest.
All right. Raquel. Click. Oh, good. He's on it. I don't have to do anything. Hi, Raquel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Raquel Garcia. I am the Executive Director for Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision. We're a tiny but very scrappy organization in Southwest. We work on working with business and industry to access funds for, to have them access money to transition into clean energy fuel, mostly diesel, decommissioning of trucks, and we're in Southwest, and we love the work that we're doing, and especially partnering with you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Tell us about how you typically work with media in your community, and maybe a little bit about how that compares or contrasts at all with what your interaction has been like with the kind of journalism that we're doing at Planet Detroit.
Well, I mean, it starts with how I started working with media in 2012 when I was an immigrants' rights advocate, activist, and what I remember is that it was event-based, right, or trauma-based. It was like, this terrible thing is happening and you need to come in and help us tell this story. Or a lot of deportations, and that was making the news, and or an accident. And so I feel like that my initial work with media is trauma-based, you know? Yeah. And so to have organizations aligned with you, that are partners to you, that have the same mission and values, it's been really great. I mean, we couldn't access media. We were really struggling to tell the story. Residents normally don't see themselves in these stories, and they again are watching trauma-based news, about their neighborhoods. Right. So when you have a partner, it's not events-based. It's more, a development of a new idea, a development of something in the neighborhood. It's, like a direction we want to go in, or there's this policy that we need, and this is why. And something that still makes me a little sad, I love the question that I heard earlier, is where do you get your news? We love to canvass. When we get the opportunity, that's one of the questions that we asked. And a couple of years ago, we did a massive, it was around the census, and we have a lot of Spanish speakers in Southwest. And I was really disappointed to know that Univision was where they were getting their news, and I'm like, they don't do anything local. It was really heartbreaking, and so we're still struggling to answer that question. Yeah. We're still struggling to get more. I think everybody here could probably say, like, you talk to a community member, and they're like, yeah, I want to tell the story, and then the minute the media's there, they're like, no, I'm too shy, and I'm embarrassed, and because storytelling is intimidating. Yep. So we are kind of an intermediary, and then when there's a friendly face, they get to know that, like Brian lives in our neighborhood, I think. So it's different. It just feels different. And so it's, you don't have to convince them as much, right? You don't have to, feel like you have to like tell a bombastic story to get someone to pay attention to what you're trying to do.
Right. All right, thank you. Okay, this is a very short panel with a lot of people, sorry. Last, but very, very much so not least, Laprisha Berry-Daniels. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So which part of myself am I introducing here?
The one you are right now.
Okay.
Before we
Okay. So in this moment, I am Laprisha Berry-Daniels. I am the Executive Director of Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice. And so Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice has a 30-year history in the city and was established as the first environmental justice organization in Michigan. Our goal really is to amplify the voice of the community as decisions are being made that impact their health and well-being. And we do that through a variety of ways, but we make sure that there's individual level interventions as well as community level and policy level interventions in all of our work.
So the slide beat us to it, but we are making an announcement today that Laprisha is joining Planet Detroit as our first executive director. I couldn't be more thrilled. Her experience with public health, with nonprofit management, with connection to the community, it's just what we need right now to keep us going, and I'm just overjoyed. So welcome, Laprisha.
Thank you.
And talk a little bit about, so when we first had the conversation, the question you asked me was, I work in public health, I work on interventions. What is journalism? How is it an intervention? So I had to kind of convince her that maybe it was. But have you come, and I know we're just starting, but have you come to any kind of understanding of, how we might be approaching with the kind of work that we want to do from your advocacy background and your public service background as well, because you were with the Detroit Health Department, as journalists?
Yeah, so thank you for that. And yes, we did have that conversation. And I was like, wait, journalism is the intervention. Now I get it. And so I am similar to Angela in that the first time I looked at Planet Detroit, I thought, look at this thing I never knew about that's probably been around. And I was mistaken. So, it was very fresh and very new. But when I was at the Detroit Health Department, I was reading Planet Detroit. And then as an executive director of DWEJ, I've been reading Planet Detroit to make sure that I am abreast of what is happening in the community. You can't be everywhere all the time. And as much as advocates, we want to be at every meeting, hearing about what's happening everywhere, we're not able to do that. And so this type of journalism allows us to sort of keep our pulse, our finger on the pulse of the community in ways that are very useful for our work. The other thing that I'll say that Jeff was sort of pointing to is I also have a background in community-based participatory research. Only style of research I've ever been involved in, and used to lead research in that way. Again, it's about amplifying the voice of the community and making sure that the community has good data to make decisions. And when I say community, I mean that broadly, right? So those that we typically call decision makers have good data. Sort of lay people have good data. Other researchers have good data. And so Planet Detroit really does fill that gap and fill that void in sort of this media space. And it goes back to that idea of trust as well. When we talk about community-based participatory research specifically, part of that is about building trust in the community and building credibility for an aspect of work that may have done harm. And so media is similar to that, right? So it's built when you have media like Planet Detroit and others that you have those same values, then it's building credibility for media in a space where media has lost a lot of credibility. Did I answer the question? I said a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the answer I was looking for. All right, so I know we have like 2 minutes left of the short panel. Did anybody else want to add anything, or is there any questions from the audience? We're going to be in the back too afterwards too. Yeah. So I'll repeat the question just in case anybody didn't hear it from the back. I think the question was, does Laprisha have to give up being an advocate in order to work in journalism, or can journalism heighten the ability to make the same impact that you're working for your whole career? Yep. I think so, more or less.
So
right?
yeah, yep. So I would say it can heighten it, absolutely. So one of the things when I started with DWEJ is I was having these community conversations. And what I found, there were two things that were coming out of these community conversations. One was no one knew what the heck environmental justice was, so that was helpful to know. And also didn't know who DWJ was as well, so that was helpful to know. But I also heard a lot of apathy. So people were like, why try? The city's gonna do what they're gonna do, the industry's gonna do what they're gonna do, so why even get involved? And so this is a way to answer the why try. So when we're able to tell the story and have the story told, then it answers that question. So really the stories we tell ourselves and others are really, really important. And this is a way to get those important stories out. It shapes what we think is possible. And so this is a way of shaping what we think is possible.
You can see why I'm so excited to have her on board. All right, I think we're going to get kicked out now, so thank you, everybody.